Becoming Elli, podcast episode number 18.
Hi, I'm Jill. Welcome to the Becoming Elli podcast, where women over 50 inspire and encourage each other to become fit and strong.
Elli, the Norse goddess of aging, surprised everyone when she beat Thor in a wrestling match. We know, like Elli, that health and fitness is a result of choices made every day.
As the goddess of aging, Elli must have known that fitness is a choice and it doesn't just magically happen.
And we know that working together with other women in a community helps to keep up the momentum. Here at the Becoming Elli podcast, we interview women who have made some intentional choices to improve their health and fitness.
Before we introduce today's guest, I want to send a shout out to one of our listeners who left a 5-star review and great comment on Apple Podcast. Okay, many people still call that iTunes. Love Pyres wrote, "Inspiring podcast. Thanks for reminding me I'm not the only 52-year-old woman who wants to be stronger and fitter in her second half. Love listening to your podcasts."
Gosh, what a wonderful review. And, I have to say something about Love Pyres. I'm not sure if that's a nickname that iTunes gave her or if she picked that, but I love that review. And, I think I can speak for you too, Jill, that you and I both appreciate, them taking the time to give us a 5-star rating and such a strong vote of confidence with that great review.
Oh, sure. I agree 100%. I'd like to invite other listeners of Becoming Elli to tell us what you think. You can leave a comment on our website or through our social media pages on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or leave a rating or comment on your podcast app.
And I want to remind everyone, we also have a private Facebook group where we can answer questions or you can answer questions with us. We discuss things like food and fitness. So take a look at the website where we have other resources as well. We have a fitness food ebook and a free list of mantras that you can download.
I'm looking forward to talking with our guest, Loretta Harland. The last time we saw Loretta, we ran into her, almost literally.
Yeah. Jill and I were doing the Blue Line training run at the beginning of September, and Loretta was running together with 4 or 5 other women that are her friends. I've known Loretta for at least 25 years, but it was only a couple years ago that I found out she is a super fit athlete. We were at a business reunion, and she said that she was running a marathon the next day. I'm really excited to talk with Loretta because I know she runs for both physical and the mental health benefits.
I met Loretta only last winter at my gym. We were doing a Ironman challenge over several weeks. I didn't realize at the time that she was a triathlon person in real life, not just in a 4-week challenge at the gym. But we were bicycling together, trying to get our miles in for the challenge. And we just, how that goes. We just started talking and then we kept bumping into each other, so it's kind of fun. Loretta really likes meeting high-energy people through running, and she dreams of running faster and going further. She's increasingly fascinated by triathlons, and I've seen she's done a few recently. She told us that she would like to get much better at cycling and swimming.
Yeah, she's pretty amazing. In fact, she's run over 20 marathons. She has organized and run the night shift on a first-place winning team of an 8-person 100-mile relay, and it was made up of all women. It was the Burning River 100. Loretta has also participated on 3 different 200-mile relay teams and has qualified for the Boston Marathon twice, once at the Columbus Marathon and the Richmond Marathon.
It was fun to run into her. She recognized us before we even saw her. Let's go to the podcast.
Welcome, Loretta. It's great to have you with us today. So why don't you give us a little background about what you're currently doing to stay fit?
Typically, I run. For some reason, I've always been kind of a runner, but I default to that. I do lots of other things, but running seems to be my core exercise. And what I try to do is throughout the year, I'll run probably 3 times a week on average. And then if I'm not training for anything specifically, I just do that so that I feel good.
Mm-hmm.
Makes me feel good both mentally and physically. And so I notice that when I get off of that routine or I stop or lower that, I don't feel so good and I can be kind of grumpy and grouchy even to other people. So I need to do that for my mental health. I need to do it for my mental health. Other people are probably wishing I would keep doing it too. So because I'm a nicer person when I do it. If I'm training for something, then that could change, and I'll mix some other things in there as well. But I usually don't run, even if I'm training for something big. I usually don't run more than 3 or 4 times a week.
Okay. And have you always been a runner your whole life, or did it get to a certain point where you decided to become a runner?
When I was in high school, I discovered running, and I would run just because it made me feel better, mostly to clear my head. So I guess you could say it was more of a mental reason for running. But I wasn't really hooked on it, and I would go for long periods of time where I didn't run, especially when I got into my 20s. But then when I got into my later 20s, I started running again for the same reason. It just kind of let me clear my head. I started dabbling around in a little bit longer distances, and just to kind of challenge myself. It'd be kind of a thrill to come home and be able to say, wow, I ran 5 miles today, or I ran 6 miles today, or whatever the number was. It was like a new challenge.
Right.
So yeah, I wasn't really hooked on it until I was in my late 20s, and then it wasn't until I was in my mid 30s that I started really running long distances and ran my first marathon.
Okay. How many marathons have you run altogether?
Well, I'm starting to lose count, but I think it's 21 or 22, something
Wow.
like that so far.
Yeah. And most recently, you've done something else besides a marathon, right?
Yeah, I've been dabbling the last couple of years I've been really interested in triathlons, and this year I thought I'd set a goal for myself to run my first Olympic distance triathlon, which is a little bit longer than any of them that I've done in the last few years. Oh. And I'm really excited to let you know that I exceeded that goal, and then I went ahead and ran a half Ironman this year. So, yeah.
And what are those distances? Because I'm not exactly sure what the difference is.
Yeah, honestly, I didn't know either until I started looking into it a little bit more. But the Olympic distance was starting off with about just under a mile swim. So I think it was like 0.93 miles. And then you bike right after that. And if I'm remembering right, the bike for that, I think it was about the length of a marathon. So about 25, 26 miles. Mm-hmm. And then you run 10K.
A 10K.
So that's Olympic distance.
Okay. So, and the 10K is like 6.2. So that's...
Right. Yeah.
And that must have been pretty challenging. Was that the most challenging event that you've done, would you say?
That was, and then I did the Ironman, half Ironman after that. But up until that point, yeah, okay, I didn't even know if I would be able to do that or not. That was the Olympic distance, okay. Yeah.
And then the half Ironman is like that far again? I mean, how big?
Almost.
Okay.
Yeah, some of those things that I just mentioned doubled. The swim went from that 0.93 or just under a mile to 1.2 miles. So that didn't double, but it was longer though in the half Ironman. And then the biking distance did double. So I ended up biking in the half Ironman. That's 56 miles of a bike ride. So that doubled. And then the run doubled also. It went from a 10K to a half marathon.
Wow.
For the run. Yeah.
And how long does it take to train for something like that?
Well, it helps if you have a base already, if you're already doing some running throughout the year, of course. I would say for me, training for the half Ironman, really, I'd say 4 to 6 months, depending on, who you are and how much training you already have. I probably spent a solid 4 months training for it.
So when you train, do you run with other people? You run by yourself or a combination?
I used to be a solitary runner.
Oh.
And just run by myself.
Okay.
Yeah, I was kind of self-conscious. I didn't want to run with other people because I thought I'm not going to be able to keep up with them, and it just could be awkward. But once I met up with some friends, some people who are in a running group, now I realize I just want to do that from now on because they're so much fun and the time goes so much faster when you're running with people that you enjoy running with. There's no worry about keeping up because there's a group and we have all different paces, so it's okay if you're a little bit behind or a little bit ahead. It doesn't matter. And they are just so motivating, both during our running times and then even when we're not running. I just get really motivated by these people.
Right. Good. Yeah. Running by yourself, and that's what I tend to do mostly. It becomes sort of a head game. It's hard to stay motivated.
It is. It's hard anyway. Even for me, I run all the time. It's still hard every single time to get that first foot out the door. And that never changes, unfortunately, at least not for me.
Yeah.
And so when you have people that are there waiting for you and you know that you're going to talk about fun things the whole time you're running, it just makes it all the worthwhile to do it.
So what kind of fun things do you talk about? I find myself sometimes talking about food, which is probably not the thing to focus on. But
it's so funny that you mentioned that, because our group, we call ourselves jokingly the Breakfast Club, because we meet in the morning, and honestly, we talk about food a lot, and I don't even think it's on purpose. I think, like to your point, it just comes out. You're just hungry and you start talking about food, and we tend to talk about where we're going to meet afterwards for breakfast. But when you're running, and same thing with how your brain works, even if you're running by yourself, you just bounce around.
Yes.
Your brain's bouncing around all these different topics. And so we'll talk about our week. How did work go? We'll talk about our relationships. A lot of them have kids, so we'll talk about what's going on in their kids' lives. Just anything and everything we talk about.
That does make the time go so much faster when you can kind of share experiences with friends. And how did you meet the running group? Was it a formal running group?
They're very informal, and it was really just I was running with one friend of mine who I met through tennis, because remember, I was a solitary runner.
Okay.
And one friend of mine through tennis said, "Hey, come run with me." So I started running with her, and then she seemed to have all these running friends, and we'd pass them all the time on the trail. And next thing you know, I was just joining their group.
Yeah.
And now that's been like 9 or 10 years ago.
Okay.
We're still running together.
Would you say the majority are in their 40s or 50s or 60s? Is it a wide group of ages, or?
It's a mix, actually. We have somebody who is more than 10 years older than I am, so she's got to be 65 or 66.
Okay.
At least because I'm 54.
Okay.
And then we have somebody who just turned 40 recently. So we've had younger people too, but I'd say that most of them are roughly between 40 and 65-ish or mid-60s.
As you've gone for 10 years now running, do you notice any differences in like your pace or your recovery, or, have there been changes and things that you do differently now that you're 54? 54. I would say there are some things that have to do with my age, though most of my running, I'd say speed and my whole mood and excitement about running is really, for me, it kind of revolves around what I've got as a goal. If I'm training for something that I'm excited about, you're going to see my pace get faster just because I know I've got a goal, and so I'm going to step it up a little bit. But as far as age goes, let's see, I have asthma, and so I have to, sometimes I'll take an inhaler before, actually a lot of times I'll take the inhaler before I start running. Okay.
Honestly, though, a lot of times I forget to do it. That's one thing for me that I have to do, but I'm really, really lucky, knock on wood. I'm really lucky because I don't have or haven't had some of the issues that other people have with like knee problems and things like that.
Oh, that's great.
So, yeah, I think, I'm kind of clumsy, which didn't even come with age. I've always been clumsy, so I can trip over things and might fall down on occasion. But now, as I'm getting older, I really limit the amount of trail runs that I do because I'm just more paranoid about tripping over something and falling because I just don't want to hurt myself.
Right. So do you have a routine after a big run of how you recover from, the big challenge? Is there any tricks of the trade?
Yes, there are a couple things, and I think that's probably regardless of age. One is if you've been doing a long run, and I learned this the hard way, if you're completing a long run, and that's relative, but I'm just going to use for my sake anywhere between half a marathon and maybe even greater than a marathon and even maybe like an ultra. If you're doing something like that, it's really good for you later that day and the following days to keep moving.
Okay.
You might think, you should just rest.
Right.
You've done a lot. You should just go sit on the couch and prop your feet up and give yourself a big rest. That's probably one of the worst things you can do.
Yeah.
because you're going to stiffen up and you're going to be a lot more sore in the following days if you don't keep moving. And I don't mean that you need to keep running those days, but just keep walking or go for a hike or do something that keeps your muscles moving.
Wow. Okay. Keeps you from getting stiff.
Sometimes I'll take a packet of Recoverite or something like that, just a packet that you mix with water.
Okay.
That's supposed to help you with electrolytes and proteins, I guess, things like that are supposed to help you recover. But I can't really tell a huge difference in whether if I do that or don't do that. I'm not sure if I see a physical difference or not, but for sure you want to keep moving.
Yeah, I know if it's a super hot day, I have to do something to replace electrolytes because I can feel kind of dizzy feeling or weird. I have that weird feeling. But it's generally when it's super hot, Do
you mean during a race or after?
After.
Or both?
After.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
But maybe that's just me too. I don't know.
Well, I think you bring up a good point. I don't so much after, but I do think that like last year's Akron Marathon was so hot and long, obviously. During a race, I don't like to drink a lot of Gatorade and things like that because it can upset my stomach. But if it's really hot and I'm going to be out there for a while, I will mix sort of like at the water stops. I'll have maybe one water stop. I'll drink some Gatorade and then another. I'll have water and then another Gatorade and then another water. So I do try to mix it up like that because, to your point, electrolytes are really important, especially if it's hot.
Yeah. When you're not running, do you do certain cross-training things or like even for preparing for an Ironman or even a half marathon, do you do certain things on certain days of the week?
I've been really bad about cross-training and being consistent with it.
Okay.
That's one of the reasons why I like the triathlons so much is because it by nature is cross training because just to finish a triathlon or even compete in any, you need to be biking and you need to be swimming and you need to be running all three.
Yeah.
And so those three things, if you just did those three things, to me, that's a lot of cross training right there. One thing I noticed this summer when I was training for the triathlon is that I felt better overall in my running. I think just doing the same thing all the time can take its toll on you. And I know running sometimes I can feel a little bit of pain in my upper back and neck. And I didn't feel that at all when I was cross training and doing the swimming and the biking while I was also working on my running. But I do think that as a whole, cross training is a really good idea. When I'm not triathlon training, I'm not very good at it. I always say I'm going to do stuff, but I do a few things, but it's not what I would like to see. But cross training is, if I was coaching someone else, I would say, hey, you need to be cross training.
Yeah, it's always easier to tell someone else what.
It is.
Do you notice a difference at work and things like that when you have been training a lot? I mean, how does it affect your life outside of exercise?
Oh, I have so much more energy.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. Yeah, just in one day. I can tell a big difference on a day that I wake up extra early and go running with my friends. Sometimes we'll incorporate like a hill run or we'll meet at the track or whatever. Or maybe it's just a run on a flat road. But if I do any of those things before I get started with my work in the morning, then my whole day is different.
Wow.
In a good way. I have so much energy and I'm just in a better mood.
That's great. You and I met years ago through work, but our careers have changed a little bit. And why don't you explain a little bit about your work and what you do?
Sure. I'm currently, at the time, I'm a small business owner.
That's great.
And my business provides corporate training and consulting. Well, my background is engineering and project management. Most of the time that I'm working with clients now, it's having to do with project management. So
you're sitting a lot and talking with people, right? I mean, I'm a marketing consultant, so I know there's a lot of meetings.
Yeah. Well, I'm sitting when I'm working at home, but when I'm working with clients, quite often I'm standing all day.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm standing. I could be facilitating or I could be leading a training course and I'd just be standing all day.
I see. Yeah. So getting a lot of the physical exercise helps you to sustain your energy through those workshops and meetings.
It does. Yeah. Like just a couple of days ago, I was working all day and conducting a training class and then I was teaching at night. And so, yeah, I didn't get home till 10:30. So it's important for me to be feeling good all day to be able to keep going like that till 10:30 at night.
Wow. Well, let me shift gears a little bit and talk about food and diet, nutrition. Do you mind sharing with the listeners, what your opinions or recommendations or, what you do for food?
Yeah, not at all. Yeah, well, I'm a vegetarian.
Okay.
And I've heard from a lot of people over the years, even not even related to running necessarily, but I've heard, oh, that's not good for you. You're probably not getting enough protein. And then when I talk to people about running and being a vegetarian, especially running long distance, and then I would hear even more things from people like, oh, that can't be good for you, and it's going to take its toll on you, and you're not going to be able to make it, however distance you're trying to go because you don't have enough of, just fill in the blank. Usually it's protein.
Yeah.
But I think I've been doing it long enough. I've been a vegetarian for over 25 years, so
yeah,
I think I could say that I've been running long enough and been vegetarian long enough that I can tell what's going on here, and it's all good.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, it's all working out really well, and I realize that not everybody wants to be vegetarian, and I don't expect other people to be that, but I think that you can be a long distance runner and be a vegetarian just fine.
And do you have certain meals or snacks or foods that you go to for, your basic snack, breakfast, lunch?
Well, I do eat a lot of peanut butter.
Okay.
And I do try to make sure that I'm getting enough carbs because I need to, for long distance running, you need to have carbs really, or at least I do. I just won't make it without carbs, but that's easy if you're a vegetarian. It's the protein that gets a little bit more difficult.
Okay.
And so I eat a lot of legumes, and I do try to keep track of what kinds of foods have more protein. And I'm lucky. I absolutely love peanut butter, and I can eat it for every meal practically.
So that's your go-to. That's really neat. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And for snacks when you're running, you said you don't do Gatorade. When you're out there for, miles and miles, especially like, the Ironman or the Olympic length, what do you eat when you're out there training or doing the race?
If I'm just doing a running race, then I will pack some sports beans.
Okay.
And they're like jelly beans, but they're more concentrated, and they're pretty delicious. I like them a lot. So they digest well. I don't get an upset stomach from them or anything. And other products that are like that, I know that there are lots of products like Hammer Gel and Goo, and I like a Honey Stinger brand myself just because, I can have my stomach can get a little queasy if I start taking in all those kinds of things because there's so much sugar and caffeine and other things in them. So I found what works for me. It seems to be Honey Stinger products mostly. A little bit of Hammer Gel products, but so the sports beans and then other kinds of the kinds of items that you can chew on, like they come in different brands again, but like Chomps and things like that. They're like little blocks that you can chew on. They're like gummy bears kind of.
Yes.
I usually don't take Goo or gels unless I have to. If I'm running a marathon or something, you kind of have to, especially the second half. So I'll take those then. But I try to avoid them if I'm on a long run, just outside of a formal race. I try to avoid them because they do upset my stomach. And lots of water.
Lots of water. Yeah. I would imagine that would be a key to all of it.
Yeah. But on the triathlon, when you need to eat a lot more food when you're doing the triathlon, especially a long distance one. You're not going to survive on just those beans and things. So for that one, you can probably predict this one. But on my bike, I have a little bag, and I put food in there, and there goes my peanut butter sandwich on the bike.
So you even have peanut butter on the bike.
Yes.
That's great. That's great. I think we've made it to the lightning round.
Okay.
And this is where I will ask you a series of questions, things that you like. Pick one or the other, or explain it or not, whatever you want.
Okay.
Let me start with coffee or tea.
For me, coffee.
Coffee.
I like both, but I prefer coffee.
Yep, me too. Another beverage, beer or wine?
Depends on how warm it is outside. If it's really warm outside, I would like to have a cold beer. But other times, a glass of red wine would go down nicely.
Yes. And elliptical, treadmill, or other?
Well, I'm a runner, so I would take the treadmill, hands down.
Okay, good. A gym or a park?
Ooh, a park for sure. Take me outside.
All right. And you've already answered the question about vegan, paleo, or keto.
Oh, for a diet? One. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
How many hours of sleep a night?
I probably average between 6 and 7 hours of sleep per night.
Good. Rice and beans or chips and nachos?
Rice and beans. Need the protein.
Okay. Now, when you make rice and beans, do you have a special recipe for something like that? Is it like black beans or what kind of?
I like any kind of beans, but I would have brown rice though.
Brown rice.
Not as opposed to white rice. Yeah.
Okay. And any kind of beans.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Loretta, I really appreciate you taking the time and being on the Becoming Elli podcast.
That's my pleasure. Well, thank you for the opportunity. This is really fun.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye
okay,
now.
Bye-bye.
Today, we're going to talk about fermented food for a healthy gut because Jill wrote a great blog post about that a few weeks ago on our website. And it's been one of the most popular subjects. For the listeners that maybe have not been going to the website and reading some of our articles, I wanted to make sure that we made this available in the podcast as well. So I'm going to turn this over to Jill at this point, and I'll probably jump in with a few of my little comments. Let's go to the fermented food.
Thanks, Chris. I decided to write the blog post about fermented food because I kept reading everywhere about how wonderful fermented food is for us and that we should all be eating it. I had read in one of the books recently about dementia and Alzheimer's that basically said we should be eating fermented food with every meal we eat. I'm lucky if I get fermented food into my diet once a day. It did make me start thinking about this a little bit more. So one of the reasons why fermented food is so popular is that they're good for our health. And the reason why, at least one of the reasons why it's good for your health to eat fermented food is because of the probiotics. So you can take probiotics through pills and whatever, but you can also get probiotics through food, and eating fermented food is a great source for that. So what are probiotics? Everyone keeps talking about those too. You'll even see ads for them now and such. Probiotics are microorganisms that our intestinal tract needs. There's a lot of talk too about this, that right now our intestines are full of bacteria and other microorganisms that is called the microbiome. And the probiotics help boost the number of beneficial bacteria found in our gut. And so sort of the idea is to help the good bacteria outnumber the bad bacteria.
Jill, I wanted to jump in here for a second because I had never even heard about probiotics until a couple years ago when someone that I know ended up getting a disease called C. diff. And what that was about, they took some antibiotics, just as a regular course of things when they needed to protect themselves from an infection. And the next thing you know, the antibiotics killed off too many probiotics in their gut. And it was really quite serious. I had never heard of the disease or any of those problems before. But I think it's something to pay attention to simply because, it can be a real life-threatening kind of thing because you don't realize that there are so many microbes in your body that protect you. And when you think of antibiotics, you think, oh, that's to get you so you're not sick. But I just wanted to throw that out there because I had never heard of that before.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So the microbes in our body we're in a very symbiotic relationship, and they really help with a lot of different things. I saw a doctor, an integrative medicine doctor, a while ago, and we were talking about dermatology, and I asked her if there was a sort of a similar kind of doctor who practices dermatology, but who was also into integrative medicine, and she said she hadn't found such a person. But that what they had found were that if you take probiotics, it clears up a lot of skin problems. I happen to be talking to a friend of mine who has identical twin daughters. And I was telling her about this, and she looked at me and she said, well, that's really interesting. She said, my two girls, she said, one takes a probiotic and the other does not. And the one who does not take the probiotic has rosacea, and the one who takes it does not.
Really?
I said,
wow, that's really interesting.
So I said, well, suggest to your daughter who has the rosacea that maybe she should take the probiotic. So I don't know, a few months later, I happened to see my friend and I said, whatever happened with your daughters? And she said she started taking the probiotic and the rosacea went away.
Wow. That's only an experimental group of two, but at the same time,
Yeah, what do they call that?
Anecdotal, right?
Yes, they call that it is anecdotal. There's a term for when you have a study of one, but
me,
but
myself,
still,
and
I thought
I.
it was, yeah, but it really doesn't get any better than identical twins.
Right.
So
that's quite interesting.
So at any rate, fermented foods. What are fermented foods? If you start to look around on the internet, you're going to find all kinds of recipes and all kinds of talk about fermented foods. So anyway, here are a few of the most popular ones. The first one, and is probably the number one recipe and number one food that everyone thinks of, is sauerkraut, because sauerkraut is a fermented cabbage dish. And what I was sort of laughing about on this is that half of our recipes on Becoming Elli have to do with cabbage. And so now we're going to talk about fermented cabbage.
Well, I guess that's because I'm partly German. My grandmother on my mom's side came from Germany, and I love sauerkraut. My husband has Polish in his descent, and on New Year's Eve, it's customary to eat sauerkraut at the stroke of midnight. And maybe it was for the fermented foods, but I think it was more just a custom.
Well,
but
I always thought, and I'm not, one of my family is of Polish descent, but we always ate sauerkraut on New Year's Day. Not at midnight, but New Year's Day we ate sauerkraut. Okay. So the thing about sauerkraut is if you go and you just buy like shelf-stable sauerkraut, it's been pasteurized. And so, obviously the point of pasteurization is to kill the bacteria. And it's just made differently, I gather. So you really want to look for sauerkraut that says naturally fermented and has not been pasteurized.
So is that the kind that's in refrigeration?
Yes.
Or not the ones that are in the jar?
The ones in the jar on the shelf have most likely been pasteurized and so will not have the probiotics. Gotcha. They'll taste perfectly good. And there may be other, I'm not saying there's no health benefits to eating that, but you won't be getting the probiotics. So you want to look for, your best bet is just to go to the refrigerator section of the grocery store and look for it there. Gotcha. And what I did notice is that most of them will say things like naturally fermented or probiotics, something. You can find something on it that will signify to you that it has the probiotics in there and that it's been naturally fermented. Mm. So basically, you ferment sauerkraut is basically cabbage and salt. So when people don't ferment it naturally, they just pour vinegar on it or something like that. So you want the really fermented type of sauerkraut. So like sauerkraut is kimchi, which is a Korean. So sauerkraut is traditionally associated with Germany, Poland, those areas. Kimchi is associated with Korea. It's a Korean side dish. It's made typically from cabbage. It may have other vegetables in it, such as radishes or you may use Napa cabbage instead of green cabbage that sauerkraut's made from. It also has more spices in it. So kimchi is often, I think of kimchi as always being spicy, but I have read that it can be mild too. But in my experience, it's always been a little more spicy. It often has things like chili powder, red pepper, garlic, and ginger in it. So a lot more spice in it than sauerkraut.
I see.
So, but it's a side dish just like sauerkraut. So, you would eat it in the same way.
So when you have sauerkraut or the kimchi, what do you usually serve as the protein?
Well, with sauerkraut, I've been buying sauerkraut and just sort of adding a small serving to my plate. But normally what I would eat with it is like a bratwurst or a sausage of some kind. I think you could do pork chops if you eat pork.
Right. Okay, sure.
But really you could eat it with anything. I think that's an interesting thing. I was just thinking about, like, I can't imagine putting sauerkraut on my salad, but I mean, so it does seem to go with meat.
Yeah, well, I could think of it on a hamburger. Well, I'd like to challenge some of our listeners because I'm sure somebody's sitting there just itching to say, this is how you serve it. This is
Right.
what I serve it with. So please send us a comment if you have a good recipe or an idea of how you serve your sauerkraut with a protein.
Well, now the other thing that I have read is that with the fermented sauerkraut, you have to be careful not to overheat it because if you throw it in the oven and cook it for 2 hours, you're going to kill the bacteria in it. So, I used to make this great meal where you would take like sauerkraut and kielbasa and potatoes and onions or whatever and throw it all in a casserole dish and throw it in the oven. But I suspect that would kill the bacteria in the sauerkraut. So,
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And kimchi, I've always had kimchi with Asian food, but I don't see why you couldn't have it in the same. So the thing about both sauerkraut and kimchi is that they are strong flavors. So you wouldn't serve them with, some delicate fish, I don't think, because it would overwhelm that. So that's why I suspect they go well with strong protein, beef, sausage, pork, things that sort of hold up against that intense flavor.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Now, pickles and fermented vegetables are another option. And this is, again, something where you have to be careful in the grocery store that you're getting truly fermented pickles, because some of the pickles that you buy, again, on the shelf are not actually fermented. They're just sort of soaked in vinegar. And so you want something that has live cultures in it and that has actually been fermented. And again, you're going to think of those. You're going to find those in the refrigerated section of the grocery store. We think of pickles as being cucumbers mainly, but you can get other vegetables as well. There's a local company around here in Ohio that makes fermented foods, and they sell fermented green beans, carrots, and a mixture of beets and apples.
Oh, that sounds great.
I did see some recipes online for fermented apples and fermented berries, and I have never had those, but I bet they would be good. I also saw one recipe recently, Chris, that made me think of you because it was fermented garlic with honey.
Oh, that's interesting. Jeez.
Yes, so I have not ever had this, but I was just reading about it. And they said that if the garlic takes on the sweetness of the honey, and then you are left with a honey that also has a bit more tang to it because it's gone through a fermentation process. So you end up with like a really interesting taste treat, I gather. It'd be interesting to try.
Yeah, we'll have to try that. For those of you that don't know, my husband's a beekeeper, so we have local honey. Well, more than local.
It's local.
From
it's
my
like
flowers, yeah.
Backyard honey.
Backyard honey, right.
Right, which is why the honey made me think of
Yeah,
you. So,
yeah.
Yes, I know people wouldn't understand that.
Right.
So another common fermented food is miso, which if you go to a Japanese restaurant, you usually get miso soup, which is basically a fermented soybean paste, which people stir into soup, or you can make, it's a paste, so it's not something you would eat on its own, but it makes a great marinade for meat, or you can make salad dressings with it, sauces for vegetables, and then soup, of course. And traditional Japanese soup, miso soup, is just sort of a broth with just a few little things in it. But I have seen some really great like vegetable soup recipes made with a miso broth. And I have never seen a recipe for making your own miso. There probably is one, but you can buy that in grocery stores. It can be difficult to find in sort of a general basic grocery store, depending on your area.
That's what I was going to ask you, because I'm not sure I've ever seen the paste of the miso. I've seen it used in cooking, but I've never seen it at my grocery store. Maybe because I'm not looking in the right aisle.
It's typically refrigerated, so you do have to find it there. I will tell you that Trader Joe's sells it.
Okay.
And then I have seen it in local grocery stores, but it is harder to find. It's probably becoming increasingly easy because people are more interested in fermented foods. I will say this. So if you're hesitant about doing it, you can buy a tub of miso and keep it in your refrigerator. It has a very long life in your refrigerator. As long as you keep it refrigerated, it's fine. You can keep it for a long time. It's a wonderful, especially in the winter, you take some broth, heat it up, add a tablespoon or two of miso paste to it, stir it up. It has a wonderful flavor. You could add a little garlic, a little ginger, and maybe a few vegetables or a little chicken or some other protein, and it's a great lunch. I love to keep miso in the refrigerator. The next one is a beverage, and that's kombucha. I have never made kombucha. I hear it's very easy to make, but I buy it. It's a little pricey to buy, but it's like buying popcorn. It has to be really easy to make and inexpensive to make, but it's also much easier to just buy it. So that's what I do. I don't drink soda and I don't drink much juice, but I do like having kombucha. It is because it's fermented, it's effervescent, it bubbles. It's got bubbles in it, and it's tangy. What kombucha is a tea that usually a black tea or green tea that is fermented, which means that there's sweetener, sugar added to it, and then it's fermented. I guess you could just drink it like that, a fermented tea, but typically people then add spices to it like ginger or fruit juices. I've had kombucha that has like a ginger lemon type thing in it. So that's even more tart. Mm-hmm. Berries which sweeten it up, but you get then the sweet and the tang of the fermented tea. I really like kombucha.
Well, you gave me a kombucha a few weeks ago, and I really was a little hesitant because I'd never tried it before. And I'll tell you, you got me hooked. I found it at Aldi's. They have like 3-4 different types at Aldi's, but you're right, it's a little bit pricey. Just for like a 16 ounce, I think it's $2.89. So I want to figure out how to make it.
Well, we could try that sometime too, because I really do hear. So to make kombucha, you need SCOBY, which is basically the microorganisms that you use to ferment things. And when you make kombucha, it automatically generates the next one. So you just save it and you can just keep using the same. You keep getting more. It's a starter. Yes.
You have a starter, sort of like a yogurt starter.
Yes, exactly. Or a sourdough bread starter. Sourdough bread is a type of fermentation. I didn't talk about that, but sourdough bread is because it has that starter in it, and that is a fermented yeast starter. That's what makes sourdough bread tangy like it is.
Oh yeah, the tanginess.
Yeah.
Okay.
So here's what SCOBY stands for: symbiotic colony of bacteria and yeast. That sounds so yummy, but
not really. Well, kombucha sounds kind of exotic, but and SCOBY, I thought that was a marketing term. I didn't realize that was the actual
technical term.
Technical,
yeah.
Right?
Then the next beverage is kefir.
Yeah,
kefir.
I say kefir.
Yeah, it's kefir. Kefir is like yogurt, but it's drinkable. It's basically fermented milk. I have seen kefir made from like coconut milk too, but I don't know if that's still considered the same. But basically you get these kefir grains, which are a combination again of yeast and bacteria, and they're added to the milk, and it thickens it up, makes it tangy, and there you go. So you can buy kefir in grocery stores now. So here's the thing. It's like buying yogurt in the grocery store. You can buy kefir. They sell fruit-flavored ones that they've added sugar and flavoring to. Be careful with that because it may be not exactly what you want. Now, you can buy the plain kefir. I have brought it home and I have thrown it in the blender with my blueberries or my strawberries and made a perfectly wonderful berry flavored kefir drink. So you can also use kefir to add to smoothies, but it does have a tangy flavor. Like the kombucha is tangy, so it's different because it's thicker and creamier. It's more like a thin yogurt. It is, I guess, a good source for calcium as well as bacteria that you get from the fermentation. If you avoid dairy, you'll have to decide if kefir is a food for you or not. I've read some articles that say that even if you avoid dairy, that kefir is still okay, but it might depend on what about dairy bothers you. So that's something that just be aware of. And same thing with yogurt. So yogurt's a fermented food. It's another fermented yogurt or dairy product. That is the one that probably I am most familiar with people making. It sounds like it's not all that difficult to make, but I've never done it.
I used to make it in college quite a bit, and it's very easy to make, but the recipe that I had made a ton of it. And I think I posted it inside the Facebook group, our closed Facebook group. So if someone's interested in it, to join the Facebook group, you'll be able to find it.
Right. I did see that there. So yeah, and that might be kind of fun to try. And I gather that the people who are using the Instant Pot, one of its selling features is that they use it to make yogurt.
Right. And maybe that's what we should do, try to do it in the Instant Pot since it already has that button that you just press for yogurt.
Oh, well, all right.
Put things in. I mean, it's pretty
that
easy.
Doesn't get any easier than pressing a button. I love pressing buttons.
Right.
It's like using my bread maker. You just throw all the stuff in there and push a button. So I've been trying to really increase the amount of fermented food because I understand the health benefits. But all of these things are more expensive to go to the grocery store and pay for. So I am really interested in trying to do this on my own. I don't know why I have such a block about it, but I do. I think I just have this image of, my mother-in-law hauling these canning jars out of the basement, and they look like science experiments that had been down there too long. And I think that's it. I think I just have this fear of, I don't know what I'm going to make, but it really can't be that. So there's part of me that thinks it really can't be that difficult. How hard could it be? People have been doing this for years. So I think.
Well, we should get together and do this, Jill.
Well, there is strength in numbers. There is definitely need some moral support on this. I think that's a great idea. I would love if any of you out there who are listening, if you do ferment your own foods, let us know and share what you make. I'd love to see a photo of what you've done, or if you have any advice on how to get past that initial fear. I'm sure once we do it, we'll become pros and we'll be making kombucha left and right and throwing in our yogurt.
Yeah.
Yum, yum. So yeah, I'd love to do it, Chris. We could take some pictures, make a video, whatever, and share that with people. But if any of you out there listening have done this on your own, please share it with us. And if there's something you like to eat that's a fermented food that I haven't mentioned, please share that as well, because I know there's lots of things that I didn't discuss.
Yeah, well, we're all trying to learn together.
Right.
Good things about healthy foods.
Right. So at any rate, these are a few of the different things that you can try. The secret, I think, to eating a healthy diet is finding things that taste good, that are also good for you. I think that's always true. So this is just something to maybe start thinking about how to add into your day-to-day eating.
Sounds good. Thanks so much for sharing this, Jill.
Oh, you're welcome. It was fun to talk about.
Healthy gut with fermented foods. Long distance running to stay fit and healthy. Hopefully you found something of interest in today's podcast. Something that may have inspired you to try something new, or provided some new insight, or confirmed something that you have already been trying. Let Jill and I know your thoughts about today's podcast by leaving a comment on our website, which is becomingelli.com. That's ELLI. Or you can connect with us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Pinterest. Just type in Becoming Elli, that's ELLI, into the search box. I want to remind you of our closed Facebook group, where most of our conversations and discussions can be found currently. Thanks for listening. I'm Chris, and I hope you'll join us again soon for the next episode of the Becoming Elli podcast, where fit and strong women over 50 inspire and encourage each other.